All right, VoyMonk video voiceover. Did everybody get their turkey and enjoy the holiday season that's kind of wrapping up? I'm not sure exactly if there's really too much left, except for I think everyone has pretty much set their eyes on the new year. So this is a video voiceover, pretty much setting up for that. I know at the beginning of this month I kind of eyeballed and made some predictions and some things that I wanted to do, but this particular video voiceover, I wanted to talk about resolution, and I had touched on this a little bit in some of my previous video voiceovers and some vlogs as well. But I think for the most part, there's a lot of, I think, anxiety that can kind of happen about this time of year, which I think probably has a lot to do with the amount of alcohol consumption and sometimes crazy events that happen, I think. New Year's is probably, again, I've said one of my least favorite holidays. I think mostly because for what we really are doing is we're passing a milestone from one year to the next. And I think that's okay. I think it's fine to chart ourselves and know where we're at, know where we want to be. But I think, like with the Christmas season, there can sometimes be a lack of appreciation or an understanding for where we are now and what's happening. And so at least, and I'm speaking for myself, that's always been my trap. So when I'm talking about resolutions, and I'm specifically talking about myself, for me, my goals going for this year are going to be to get more organized, get better organized, to eat healthier, get in shape, and lose weight. That's kind of all the same thing. And of course, learn to cook. Those are my resolutions, as to speak. And I know where I'm at. I'm not a great cook. I definitely don't cook nearly enough, as I think that's kind of something that a lot of people are guilty of. I've talked about a lot of things in terms of the way things have changed, and I would say in order to get a quick meal, that is something that has definitely become something more easy to get. A lot of processed foods, sometimes a bit of overconsumption. I think I was talking about, drinking, but I think overeating can definitely be, at least for me, something that can be an addiction. It's certainly a way, it has been a way of coping without me realizing it sometimes. Because like when I was talking about organizing, for the most part, I'd say that part of the reason why I didn't organize had to do with the fact that most of my life felt very uncontrollable. And that, having my major anxiety and depression and the things that factor in, along with my ADHD and my real lack of ability to concentrate and sometimes short-term memory, where I am and where I was is that it was hard for me to focus. There really for one of a lot of different reasons, hasn't really seemed to be a path forward to having the type of what some people might think is just a responsibility, but in some ways kind of a bit of a luxury in terms of having stability enough to know what you can kind of count on and what you can't. I mean, there's overall things that you can count on, good or bad, but I think for me, for the most part, that's where I'm at right now. And as far as getting organized, yet part of the anxiety and part of the depression is that I obviously have tried to do that before, just like dieting and exercise, like I think most people do yearly and different times in our lives. And we often struggle, and I would say usually fail. I think, people say failing is part of the process, but I can honestly say that knowing that and hearing that doesn't really help, but I think not knowing why you're making a change and doing it for the right reason and really appreciating that for me really has been something that's helped. When starting this channel, I had lots of apprehension about doing it. I don't have the right kind of microphone. I don't have the right kind of setup. I don't want to sound stupid. I am completely out of practice in terms of my voiceover. The quality's not going to be. There's a lot of reasons telling me not to do things, and that's that subconscious part of me that is one that has experienced the fear and the stress and some of the traumatic things that I have gone through, but along with the mental condition that I have. That's, just every bit as part of who I am as a bad back or a knee. It's the brain. And so going into resolution and being resolute, I think, for me, I would say the ability to slow down is probably the first hurdle that I have. Meaning sometimes, I guess the best way to kind of explain this is that sometimes after you're recouping physically, like my mom had open heart surgery, and one of the things that she kind of struggled with a bit is that my mom is coordinated. She's able to walk. She's able to do things that she wants to do. But of course, when you're doing the recuperating, like doing things as simple as just walking. Now I know some people. There's different, I would say, benefits to different things that you'll do, meaning in terms for as just walking, as far as walking slowly and purposefully and trying to regain the memory in terms of the muscle movement and that sort of thing to get into practice, and also building stamina by going slowly. But then there's also coordination and balance, which comes from maybe being a little bit quicker and having a quicker pace. Well, the thing is that when my mom was going through recuperation, one of the things that she would do, really wouldn't have a problem with doing, is walking quickly and being, believe it or not, more coordinated. But the thing that was a little bit more difficult for her was not just simply walking and being quick about it, but also taking time, building stamina, walking for a long time and not as quickly versus going very quickly in a short time and maybe even traveling a greater distance. And so the reason I bring that up is because there are different exercises, different practices, and for me and in my experience, they have different results. And if I can compare that to what I'm talking about in terms of getting better organized or dealing with, as far as for myself, my mental issues, those are the things that I'm talking about. When I say, and I've said this before, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and getting a different result. But the real question for me is, do I want a different result? If I'm in a bad place, for example, if I'm doing something that's making me just unhappy, the alternative is to change and do something else that can also make me just as unhappy. I think, like I said, having major depression and major anxiety, part of that journey is not necessarily doing something like Nike says, just do it, but having an complete understanding as to why I'm doing it and what for. So when I think of resolution, I try to think of it in real terms rather than just the idea, because ideas are great until they actually meet real life and, what you think you want versus what you should actually have, you find out can be really two different things. So that's part of the journey. As far as the cooking, for example, I don't plan to be a Chef Ramsay overnight. And, as far as, why I don't do more cooking. Why do people eat processed foods? And I talk about how quick it is to get foods, but I think the thing that kind of gets glossed over, because for one reason or another, some people have different expectations and experiences, and maybe have different goals. A one size fits all doesn't always work, and a lot of times I think it can be because, you know, sometimes problems can seem simpler than they actually are. I mean, cooking, for example, uh, people should cook more. People shouldn't eat processed foods. But the truth of the matter is there are things that kind of come along the ways, and and some people maybe chalk it up as far as excuses. But if you have real conditions, if you have a real serious issue that someone isn't able to sympathize with because they've never gone through, and they certainly don't empathize with because maybe there's indifference or something like that, it can be very difficult to sometimes really get results. And I think that's part of the frustration. I mean, when you say processed foods, well, everything is kind of a process. Collecting apples in an orchard is a process, right? Now, is it a process in terms of going from human hands to the kitchen table? Well, yeah. I mean, to some degrees, there's also some things that happen within that process. If you watch the news or you read about whether it's meats or vegetables or something like that, the process isn't always one that, you know, you feel good about. It isn't something that you necessarily always know, you know, what kind of risk you may not be taking. And then, of course, you know, dealing with prices. And I'm poor. I don't have access to a lot of foods. And while some things might be cheaper options, I see a lot of stuff about, say, like Dollar Tree foods or Dollar General foods and all that kind of thing. Again, there are real reasons why maybe a $2 steak maybe isn't really any healthier for you than a McDonald's burger. I mean, sure, there's ways to make it probably safer or get something out of cooking that is more nutritious. But again, if you don't have certain kinds of luxuries in the way of either not only education but access, it can be rather quite, I would say, uncomfortable. And the truth is that when I talk about empathy and sympathy, which, you know, are about having compassion, they're two different things. And so, you know, I'm speaking about myself, you know, because I'm my biggest critic. And I would say a lot of times the self-talk that I do is most destructive because I really know that there's a difference between a reason and an excuse. Some people might not say that, but I think there is. And when you're just not getting something done or you're just unhappy, sometimes jumping before you look is the thing that often results out of that same frustration. So when I think about resolutions, that's oftentimes the type of thing that I'm thinking about in those terms. And so when I want to do a resolution this year, when I talk about the year, you know, that's just wrapped up in the season, being in the here and now and being purposeful is extremely difficult for me. And it's very much a part of that process of getting to the point where I can organize, to negotiate or come together with myself in a way that all parts of me are working together and to be more successful, as opposed to the conscious part of me that wants something and the subconscious part of me that has fears and anxieties and things that I'm just not dealing with, and so I feel stuck. And that's why I say, in terms of this time specifically, this specific holiday, the first of the year and changing of the seasons, it brings with it anxiety and things that make me nervous and uncomfortable, because it is a dealing with things that, quite frankly, it's not necessarily seem like a bad back or a knee or something. It's physical. But with the brain is every bit as much and to me as important as any other body part, and it works a certain way and it doesn't work in other ways. And when you have problems or diseases or conditions, it's definitely a time that, if you're already coming off the holidays, for example, I know that we try to project as much love and as positivity and, making it the best of who and what we can be, so that hopefully that inspires. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it doesn't. If you're alone during this time of the year, if things may not necessarily be going your way, it's for me right now especially. It can be a difficult time to, have any goals or be afraid to, have any expectations or hope for what's happening next or what's gonna happen next, and that has as much to do with your overall health as everything and anything else. And, some people chalk it up to intelligence and that kind of thing. And that certainly can be something I think, is in the favor or not. But I would say for the most part, everyone has blind spots. There are brilliant people right now that, for instance, have a very high IQ that are just as depressed as some people that don't, and, living this life is the hardest thing that I believe we know and that we can do. And so I think when it comes to making resolutions, I think that's why it's important to actually understand why we're making resolutions, where we're at, where our real expectations are. And even if you don't make a resolution now or feel compelled because of, well, it's the new year, so you've got to do it right now. I do think, as my favorite holiday season just wrapped up, being in the present of the now and love and compassion and having that sense of why something is important as opposed to what's being told to you about why it should be important. And for me, that is an important distinction, wrapping up this 2024 and this being Monday and and the New Year's just around the corner. And I think, quite frankly, people kind of wonder, why is there so much drinking around this time of year? I think that's the reason why. There's drinking, there's food, there's festivities. But as someone who's got the condition of avoidance, mine's food, but I think alcohol, I think a lot of things that go into the celebration are very much a reveal of a lot of times who we are and what we are. And I'm speaking about myself specifically because I'm not a drinker. But as far as what's cause for celebration, otherwise, the New Year's could just be like any other holiday, even like Christmas, if you're alone and you struggle and, there's things that you're going through. So I want to say that going into this New Year's Eve and, of course, the next few days and that, I think if you can do a resolution and be mindful what the reasons that is, if I can do that, more importantly, I think that that's good. I'm speaking in general, it's not specifically to or towards anything. And I'm certainly not preaching, but I think it's also important to be mindful, even if your resolution is to not make any resolutions, which I've very rarely ever heard anybody say that, just like, I am where I am, and maybe I know where I am and why I'm there, or maybe I don't. But I think rather than jumping and not looking before you leap, or I leap, rather, specifically. I said generically, but I'm talking about myself. I think it's important to take time and not feel the rush. Time, as I've said before, is the one currency you ain't getting a refund on. And if you miss the times by rushing through what's important and that you'll miss for the things that you want to avoid or fear, fear is something, anxiety is a part of life. It's a disease, it's a condition that's almost crippling. But it's not about necessarily what you can't do, but if you can find a way to do, I think that is, for me, and I'm speaking about me, the struggle, and what you'll hear me talk about to some degree. I don't really, this isn't me dumping, problems and things like that as far as my content and that. Like I said, I like to talk about life in general and, not specifics like preaching and all that kind of stuff, but just sharing the experience and the journey. And so that's what I'll do. That's what I wanted to talk about in this video voiceover for Monday and the 30th and going into the 31st. And the year is almost done, and we're almost into 2025. So I guess for the most part, I kind of wonder what that means for a lot of people. If you're listening, maybe make a comment, make a video. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like what you hear, of course, you know what to do. As far as hopefully you follow and give a thumbs up. But I want to say I don't get very optimistic. Like I said, part of having major depression and anxiety, at least for me, is that I don't have. I have ebbs and flows, but usually my flows are pretty consistent in terms of low expectations on many fronts. So, but I tried to move forward nevertheless. So hopefully if you like what you hear, you tune in this week. But until next time, take care.